And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
I hope it's a wake-up call to Putin, and I hope to some extent it's a wake-up call to us. I have said before, and I really believe it, we will fight them now or we will fight them later. It's only a question of time. They're now in 12 countries. They've done 25 major attacks in these countries outside of Syria and Iraq in the last 2 years. This is a huge worldwide problem, and we've got to play a major role. The Russians should as well.
Well, as they say, even a stopped clock is right twice a day, and I guess they've adjusted or titrated Feinstein's medication, because here she is, the head of the most important Senate committee, finally awakening to the fact that ISIS is a threat to our survival. Welcome to the Savage Nation. Now, instead of talking about the existential threat of these Islamo-fascists to our survival, instead we hear about a group of football players who force a college president to resign for kind of very vague reasons, frankly. Now, I never heard of anything like this. They forced the president of the University of Missouri, Tom Wolf, they fire him in essence, because he didn't handle student complaints about race properly. Now, I don't have any idea why he would resign. He wasn't responsible for any of these things. And I read their list of demands, you see. The list of demands are identical to that of the Black Panthers of the 1960s. The same fist in the air, the same demand for more minorities, the same old, same old, same old. I have a question. Why weren't the football players suspended who threatened not to play? It's that simple. Suspend them. So I realize that universities today are more about sports than they are about academia. That I get. And that sports bring them a lot of money. I get that as well. And it's all about money. And so that's why you have an upside-down, topsy-turvy world. This is the Savage Nation. Welcome to me back. And I'm glad to be back. I took a few days last week for personal reasons after a very intense launch of Government Zero, which, thanks to you, made it to number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to say something else to you about ISIS. There is a dance of death in the West and actual death in the Middle East, courtesy of the Islamo-fascists. Meanwhile, the Caesar in the White House entertains himself with 1,000 sycophants, partying on behind closed doors, as if the Islamo-fascist hand will not touch him. He thinks he's protected from this new plague, the Black Death of radical Islam. But we're facing something the West hasn't had to deal with since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th centuries. You see, when those religious wars ended in one place, they began in another, and they lasted for over 100 years. The same thing is happening right now. The radical Muslims are on the warpath, and they are against everyone else. They are against Muslims who are not as fanatical. They are against the members of all other religions. They think they are going to take us back to some pristine religious period in human history that never actually occurred. It's all complete garbage. These faith warriors live lower than the pigs they despise. They kidnap and rape 8-year-old girls and say the Quran authorizes it. They're not purists. They're killers. They're psychopathic Nazis in headscarves. They aren't leading a religious revival. They're trying to take us back to a state of barbarism that has been extinct for 1,200 years. This is a barbaric revolution, and we have a man in the White House who denies its existence. But whether he chooses to acknowledge it or not, it's going to continue until someone puts a stop to it, and let us hope that that is Vladimir Putin of Russia, who even Dianne Feinstein says we must cooperate with. Can you imagine that we have such a fool in the White House? That even a liberal senator from California has to say, hey, wait a minute, this is serious business here. It's been said that the fight against radical Islam is the defining conflict of the next generation. He likened radical Islam to a starfish. When you cut off a spider's head, it dies. But when you cut off the leg of a starfish, the starfish can regenerate it. Radical political Islam is a starfish. If you defeat ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they will merely come back under another name. Why would any government bring in unvetted Muslim immigrants at a time like this? It would seem that only an insane prince would do this to his own country. But Obama is not insane. He's stoned on the orthodoxy of the progressive left. Obama and his supporters are drunk on their ideology. They think they're going to create a progressive utopia by continuing their attack on all Western values. This is precisely how great civilizations of the past declined and eventually fell. They rejected the values that made them great and degenerated into narcissism and selfishness. They kept on partying until they were too weak to defend themselves. Then the unthinkable happened. They fell. That's the opening page to Government Zero. Now you know why it's a bestseller. It's the most important book of our generation. The phone number is 855-407-282. Now let's go back to the hatred in the United States of America. As I said before, University of Missouri president is forced to resign, allegedly over some complaints that football players had. Well, I want to read you what a black sportscaster had to say today on ESPN2. Co-host Stephen A. Smith reacted to the news of the University of Missouri president, Tim Wolf, being forced to resign amid racial tension and protests on campus. Mr. Smith first said that Wolf had to go due to the black football players skipping out on football activities until he steps down. I disagree, by the way. I would have dismissed the football players and suspended football. And remember what the mission of a university is. It's not football, it's learning. But nevertheless, he later added that, quote, everyone who is white is not racist. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Warning black America, he did, that just because someone with different pigmentation disagrees with them does not make them racist. He continued, and remember, he is African American. To white Americans out there, accept the reality that at some level racism exists. It's inescapable. It's a reality, Smith said. But to black America, let me make this statement. Everyone who is white is not racist. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And it's important to point out that because with this particular incident, it was warranted. But that doesn't mean we turn around in the second somebody disagrees with us of a different hue, pigmentation, culture, etc. The second somebody might be oblivious or ignorant to what we are, what we believe, what we feel, doesn't make them racist. Just like folks have an obligation to get whatever racist tendencies may be inside their bones, we have an obligation to appreciate there are a lot of people in this God-fearing country that we live in who are not racist. Don't be so quick to jump, he cautioned. And that opens the show on the Savage Nation. Phone number here is 855-400-7282. Now they're demanding, I'll read you the demand list. You won't believe the Missouri protest. It's right out of the 1960s, the same garbage that Huey Newton and the Black Panthers imposed upon America and got nowhere. It led them nowhere. It's a dead end. It got them nowhere. When I read you the list of demands issued to the university by the subliterates, you'll see that we've gone back 50 years as a result of the president's, I would say, very subtle racism that he has provoked in this nation. And I say again, if these football players are so sensitive to issues, I ask you, don't you think the university should have said to them, we are addressing these issues, but if you continue to protest and you continue to sit in or whatever you're going to do, we're going to dismiss you from the university until you come back. This is not about you. This is about us. We run the university, not you. Football players are not known for their brains. Let's be clear. They're known for their brawn. Why in the world would an entire university kowtow to a group of athletes who are not known for their brains when it is supposed to be an institution of higher learning, not football playing? That's the opening to the show. And now I'll read you some of the demands of the, what group is this now? It's racial turmoil. Oh, Concerned Student 1950. And they issued the demands to the university last month. 1, we demand that the University of Missouri System President Tim Wolf writes a handwritten apology to the Concerned Student 1950 demonstrators and holds a press conference in the Mizzou Student Center reading a letter. This is right out of Communist China, by the way, where they forced people who were not compliant with communism to admit their wrongdoing and stand and be ashamed in the streets. This is straight out communism. It's a disaster. In the letter and at the press conference, they say, Tim Wolf must acknowledge his white male privilege, recognize the systems of oppression exist, and provide a verbal commitment to fulfilling Concerned Student 1950 demands. We want Tim Wolf to admit to his gross negligence, allowing his driver to hit one of the demonstrators, consenting to the physical violence of bystanders, And lastly, refusing to intervene when Columbia Police Department used excessive force with demonstrators. All right, I don't even want to read anymore. You get the picture. You get the picture. The thugs are now running the university. Period. End of story. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it because I put up with this my whole life. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that these football players did the right thing by forcing a university president out? Or do you feel, as I do, that they should have been told that they will be thrown out of the university if they don't, well, let's say, do their job? It's that simple. If you don't do your job, or you want to protest, good for you. We live in a free country. But you don't demand that the president resign, do you? What did he have to do with their complaints? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. How do you feel about this? Now, there's another topic that I think is far more serious than that, which was the ISIS issue, as I read to you in Government Zero, and I hope you'll pay attention and sort of not lose the big picture, the big game. The big game is the big war. The big game is the war against Islamofascism that they have inflicted upon us. The big game out there is the one that Russia is fighting and that Obama is feigning. That's the big war. But we'll talk about the little wars here in America, conducted by the illegitimate radical left in order to, A, weaken us and B, distract us from the real enemies, not only within but without. I saw another story this weekend that attracted my eye, and I don't want to give too much of it in the first 10 minutes of the show, but that's what I normally do. I do more in 10 minutes than you'd expect. There was a thermonuclear missile launch near Los Angeles over the weekend. We do not know if that missile contained a nuclear weapon or not. We don't know where it went. But there's a big question. Viewers across California and parts of the West Coast reported seeing a very strange, very large flash of light across the Pacific Ocean Saturday night, and then they were told the U.S. Navy was conducting a missile test. Now, here's the question to the American audience and to the world. You mean in the entire Pacific Ocean, one of our submarines, the USS Kentucky, and Ohio-class SSBN, could not have launched the missile in the middle of the ocean? Why did they have to launch it off the coast of California and alter flight paths at LAX? Why did they do that? Why wasn't the entire Pacific Ocean good enough for such a test launch? Why did the U.S. military, meaning Barry Obama and the sorority, choose to launch such a test right off the coast of California? I'll tell you what I think is going on the minute I return right here on the Savage Nation.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. It's Monday. You know, there's a lot of real topics out there. We're being distracted by the stupidity of the football players in Missouri. But you look at the big picture. You look at the ISIS war against the world, and we're not hearing a word about it from Caesar in the White House. And then you ask yourself, what the heck is going on that the U.S. Navy would conduct a test of this magnitude, firing a missile from a Trident submarine, USS Kentucky, an Ohio-class SSBN, off the coast of Southern California? Why would they launch from the West Coast, forcing airplanes to divert, freaking out, I don't know, millions of people on the West Coast who saw a strange large flash of light across the ocean Saturday night? Why did the U.S. Navy test so close to our shore? Well, I have the answer. As usual, Michael Savage is the answer man. You want to hear the answer? I'll give you the answer, because you see, China has, with American technology, stolen technology given to them by Democrat donors going all the way back to the Clinton era, been rapidly developing not only their Navy, but their ability to launch nuclear missiles at the United States of America from the homeland of China. Unfortunately for the Chinese, they have only a range of 1,500 miles. And so the United States had to show China that although they are certainly capable of annihilating a city or a nation, they cannot reach the United States of America from China with a missile launch. But we can reach them with a missile launch. And if you think Obama is making the world a safer place, I disagree with you totally. I disagree with you totally. This lunatic in the White House has damaged relations with